The year was 2147, and humanity had reached farther into the stars than ever before. Advances in technology allowed people to travel across vast distances in space, and the discovery of new planets became a common occurrence. But nothing could have prepared the crew of the starship Odyssey for what they were about to encounter. It all started with a signal, a faint, rhythmic pulse coming from a distant exoplanet named Kepler 538b. At first, scientists thought it might be a natural phenomenon like radiation from a dying star or interference from cosmic dust. But as they analyzed the signal more closely, they realized it was something far more extraordinary. Someone or something was trying to communicate. Commander Daniel Hayes stood on the bridge of the Odyssey, staring at the holographic display of Kepler 538b. The planet looked unremarkable at first glance, with swirling clouds of green and blue covering its surface. But beneath those clouds lay mysteries waiting to be uncovered. Hayes was a man of few words, known for his calm demeanor under pressure. He had served in the military for over 20 years and led countless missions, but this one felt different. This wasn't just another routine exploration. It was humanity's first chance to make contact with an alien civilization. And that made him nervous. Beside him stood Dr. Lavra Bennett, the ship's lead scientist and linguist. She was younger than most of the senior crew members, but her brilliance had earned her a place on this mission. Her dark hair was tied back in a loose ponytail, and she clutched a tablet filled with data about the mysterious signal. "We've decoded some patterns," she said, her voice steady despite the excitement bubbling inside her. "It's not random noise. There's structure here repeating sequences that suggest intelligent design." Hayes nodded slowly. "Are you saying we're dealing with aliens?" "Almost certainly," Lover replied. "But we won't know for sure until we get closer." Lieutenant Ryan Carter, the ship's pilot, leaned forward in his seat. His fingers danced across the control panel as he adjusted the course. "ETA to Kepler 538b is 12 hours, he announced, assuming no surprises along the way. "Let's hope there aren't any," Hayes muttered. He turned to address the rest of the crew. "Listen up, everyone. This mission is unlike anything we've done before. We don't know what or who we're going to find down there. Stay sharp, stay focused, and remember, our goal is peaceful contact. No matter what happens, we represent Earth. Understood?" A chorus of affirmatives echoed through the bridge. Everyone knew the stakes. If this mission succeeded, it could open the door to alliances, trade, and knowledge beyond imagination. But if it failed, it could mean disaster not just for the crew, but for all of humanity. 12 hours later, the Odyssey entered orbit around Kepler 538b. The planet's atmosphere shimmered with hues of gold and crimson, creating a breathtaking sight. Through the viewport, the crew gazed in awe at the alien world below. Mountains rose like jagged teeth against the horizon, while rivers of molten lava snaked across the landscape. It was both beautiful and terrifying. Lavra studied the readings on her tablet. "The signal's stronger now," she said. "It's coming from a large structure near the equator. Looks artificial." "That's where we'll land," Hayes decided. "Carter, take us down." As the ship descended, the crew prepared for their first encounter. Private Jake Monroe, a young soldier assigned to protect the diplomatic team, checked his weapon one last time. He was new to missions like this, but he was determined to prove himself. Nearby, Samantha Lee and Greg Miller, two junior officers, exchanged uneasy glances. Neither of them had expected to be part of such a high-stakes operation. When the Odyssey touched down on the planet's surface, the air outside was thick with heat and strange, metallic scents. The landing site was surrounded by towering rock formations that seemed to glow faintly in the dim light. Hayes led the team out, followed closely by Lavra, Ryan, Jake, and several others. Each step felt heavier than the last, weighed down by the gravity of the moment. They hadn't gone far when they saw them dot at first. They thought the creatures were statues, massive, dragon-like figures carved from stone. But then one of them moved, its massive wings unfurling with a sound like thunder. The humans froze, their breaths caught in their throats. The creatures were enormous, standing nearly 7 meters tall. Their bodies were covered in shimmering scales that reflected the light in dazzling patterns. Long tails swayed behind them, tipped with razor-sharp spikes. Their eyes glowed with an inner fire, piercing through the haze. These are the signals creators? Lavra whispered, her voice trembling. I think so, Hayes replied. Stay calm. Let's see what they do. One of the creatures stepped forward, its movements slow and deliberate. Its head tilted to one side, studying the humans with obvious curiosity. Then it let out a low growl, a sound so deep it vibrated through the ground. The humans instinctively took a step back, except for Lavra, who stood her ground. We need to show them we mean no harm, she said. Slowly, she raised her hand, palm open, mimicking a gesture of peace she had seen in old Earth documentaries about animal behavior. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the creature roared, a deafening sound that sent shockwaves through the air. Its massive claws shot upward, ready to strike. Panic surged through the group, but Hayes quickly stepped between Lavra and the creature, raising his arms in a non-threatening posture. Don't move, he shouted. Nobody fire. The tension was palpable. For several agonizing seconds, it seemed like the creature was going to attack. But then another roar echoed from behind it, deeper and louder than the first. A second creature emerged, even larger than the first. Its scales gleamed like polished silver, and its presence commanded respect. The first creature lowered its claws and stepped aside, bowing its head slightly. Lavra exhaled a shaky breath. I think we just met their leader. The larger creature approached, its glowing eyes fixed on the humans. It emitted a series of low-frequency sounds, accompanied by strange pulses that seemed to resonate in their minds. Lavra frowned, trying to decipher the meaning behind the noises. This is incredible, she murmured. They're communicating, but not in a way we're used to. What do we do now? Ryan asked, his hand hovering near his weapon. We wait, Hayes said firmly. And we listen. The creature paused, as if considering their response. Then it turned and began walking away, gesturing for the humans to follow. Hayes hesitated for a moment, then nodded. Let's go, he said, but stay alert. As they trailed after the massive beings, the crew couldn't help but feel a mix of wonder and fear. They had come seeking answers, but now they realized how little they truly understood. Whatever lay ahead, one thing was certain. This was only the beginning. The humans followed the towering dragon-like creatures, their footsteps crunching against the rocky terrain. Each step felt heavier than the last, not just because of the planet's gravity, but also because of the weight of uncertainty pressing down on them. The air was thick with heat, and the metallic scent grew stronger as they ventured deeper into the alien landscape. Lavra Bennett stayed close to Commander Daniel Hayes, her mind racing with questions. What did these creatures want? Were they truly trying to communicate, or was this some kind of trap? The larger creature, the one that seemed to be the leader, led them toward a massive structure in the distance. It looked like a fortress carved from obsidian, its jagged edges glinting faintly in the dim light. As they approached, the humans noticed intricate patterns etched into the walls, glowing faintly with an inner light. The designs were unlike anything they had ever seen, swirling and shifting as if alive. Private Jake Monroe tightened his grip on his weapon, his eyes scanning the area for any signs of danger. He wasn't sure what scared him more, the giant aliens or the eerie silence that surrounded them. When they reached the entrance, the leader turned to face them, its glowing eyes scanned the group, lingering on Lavra for a moment before it let out another low growl. This time, The sound was accompanied by a series of telepathic pulses that reverberated in their minds. Lavra winced, clutching her head, but she forced herself to focus. It's trying to say something," she said, her voice trembling. "I can feel it. What does it mean?" Hayes asked, his tone calm but firm. "I don't know yet," Lavra admitted. "But I think it's testing us." The leader gestured again, motioning for the humans to enter the structure. Hayes hesitated, glancing at his team. "We go in," he said finally, "but stay sharp. If anything happens, we retreat immediately." Inside, the fortress was even more overwhelming. The walls pulsed with light, casting strange shadows across the floor. The air was cooler here, almost soothing, but the sense of unease remained. The leader stopped in the center of a large chamber and turned to face the humans once more. It emitted another series of sounds, louder this time, and the ground beneath their feet vibrated slightly. Lavra stepped forward cautiously, raising her hands in what she hoped was a universal gesture of peace. "We come in peace," she said slowly, emphasizing each word. She knew the creatures probably couldn't understand her, but she hoped the tone of her voice would convey her intentions, not to her surprise. The leader tilted its head, as if considering her words. Then it raised one of its massive claws and pointed at Lavra. For a moment, nothing happened. But then, without warning, the creature roared a deafening sound that echoed through the chamber. Lavra stumbled back, nearly falling, but Hayes caught her arm and steadied her. "What was that about?" Ryan Carter whispered, his hand hovering near his weapon. "I don't know," Lavra replied, her heart pounding. "But I think it misunderstood me." The roar seemed to trigger something in the other creatures. They began moving closer, their glowing eyes fixed on the humans. Jake instinctively raised his weapon, his finger hovering over the trigger. "Commander, should I—" "No," Hayes interrupted sharply. "Stand down. We're not here to fight, but they're surrounding us." Samantha Lee hissed, her voice tinged with panic. "Stay calm," Hayes ordered. "We need to figure out what's happening." The leader stepped forward again, its massive form casting a shadow over the humans. It let out another growl, this time softer, almost questioning. Lavra took a deep breath and tried again. "We are friends," she said, pointing to her chest and then gesturing outward. "Friends." The leader paused, its glowing eyes narrowing. Then it reached out with one of its claws, stopping just inches from Laura's face. She froze, her breath catching in her throat. The claw hovered there for a moment before gently tapping her forehead. A jolt of energy surged through her, and she gasped, stumbling backward. What did it do? Hayes demanded, stepping forward to help her. I don't know," Lavra stammered, clutching her head. "It felt like it was reading my thoughts." The leader let out a low rumble, almost like a purr, and stepped back. The other creatures relaxed slightly, their glowing eyes no longer fixed on the humans with such intensity. Lavra exhaled slowly, realizing that whatever had just happened, it seemed to have diffused the tension for now. Back on the Odyssey, the crew gathered in the briefing room to discuss what had happened. The atmosphere was tense, with everyone voicing their concerns. Greg Miller paced back and forth, his arms crossed tightly over his chest. "We can't trust them," he said bluntly. "They're too dangerous. One wrong move, and they could kill us all." "We don't have a choice," Lavra argued. "If we leave now, we might never get another chance to make contact. And if we fail, it could mean war. Or worse," Samantha added. "What if they decide to attack Earth?" Hayes held up a hand, silencing the argument before it could escalate. "Enough," he said firmly. "We're not giving up. But we need to be smarter about how we approach this." "Lavra, what did you learn from that encounter?" Lavra hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "They're intelligent, far more than we expected. Their communication is complex. It's not just verbal or physical. They use telepathy, and they seem to respond to emotions as much as actions. That's why my gesture of peace worked, but only after I calmed down. They pick up on fear and aggression. So we need to control our emotions, Hayes concluded. Got it. Anything else? They're curious about us, Lavra continued. When the leader touched my forehead, it felt like it was scanning my mind. I think it wanted to understand us better. Maybe that's why they didn't attack. Ryan leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. So what's the plan? Do we go back and try again? Yes, Hayes said without hesitation, but we'll take precautions. Jake, you'll stay close to Laura during the next meeting. If anything goes wrong, your job is to protect her. Jake nodded, though his expression was grim. Understood, Commander. Later that night, as the crew prepared for their second attempt at communication, tensions ran high. Samantha and Greg met in a quiet corner of the ship, speaking in hushed tones. We can't let this mission succeed, Samantha said, her voice barely above a whisper. These creatures are too unpredictable. If they turn hostile, humanity won't stand a chance. What do you suggest? Greg asked, his brow furrowed. Samantha glanced around to make sure no one was listening. We sabotage the negotiations. Make it look like an accident. If the Vrikan think we're a threat, they'll destroy us before we can cause any real damage. Greg hesitated, clearly uneasy about the idea. That's risky. If we're caught, we won't be, Samantha interrupted. We just need to plant something small, a distraction. Enough to make them doubt us. Greg sighed, running a hand through his hair. All right, but if this goes south, we're dead. As they finalized their plan, neither of them noticed Private Jake Monroe watching from a distance. Jake had overheard part of their conversation, and his stomach churned with unease. He knew he had to report them to Hayes, but he also knew it could make things worse. For now he decided to keep quiet, hoping he could find a way to stop them. Before it was too late, the next morning, the crew returned to the fortress, determined to make progress. Lavra carried a device designed to translate their language, though she wasn't sure how effective it would be. Hayes led the group, his posture rigid but his expression calm. As they entered the chamber, the leader greeted them with a low growl. Its glowing eyes fixed on Lara. This time, the humans were ready, or so they thought. The humans stood in the shadow of the massive dragon-like creatures, their hearts pounding as they prepared for another attempt at communication. Lavra Bennett clutched her translation device tightly, her fingers trembling slightly. She had spent hours tweaking it, trying to make it sensitive enough to pick up on the Vrikan's telepathic pulses and low-frequency growls. Commander Daniel Hayes stood beside her, his posture calm but alert, ready to step in if things went wrong. Private Jake Monroe stayed close to Lavra, his weapon slung over his shoulder, his eyes scanning the chamber for any sign of danger. Leader of the Vrikan, the one who had tapped Laura's forehead during their last meeting, stepped forward. Its glowing eyes locked onto her, and it let out a soft rumble, almost like a greeting. Lavra took a deep breath and held up the translation device, hoping it would work. We come in peace, she said slowly, her voice steady despite her nerves. We want to understand you. The creature tilted its head, studying her with obvious curiosity. Then it emitted a series of sounds, deep growls, mixed with strange, pulsing vibrations that made the air hum. Lavra adjusted the settings on her device, trying to match the frequency of the sounds. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, faintly, words began to appear on the screen. They were fragmented and unclear, but Lavra could make out a few phrases: intruders, sacred ground, and ancestors. Her eyes widened as she realized what the Vrikan were trying to say. They think we've invaded their territory, she whispered to Hayes. This planet, it's sacred to them. They believe we're here to disrespect their ancestors. Hayes frowned, processing the information. How do we explain that we didn't know, that this was a mistake? Lavra hesitated, then pointed to herself and shook her head. Not enemies, she said firmly. She gestured to the rest of the team, emphasizing the word friends. The leader watched her closely, its glowing eyes narrowing as if trying to decide whether to trust her. To break the tension, Lavra reached into her bag and pulled out a small holographic projector. She activated it, and images of Earth appeared. In the air, a blue-green planet surrounded by swirling clouds. The Vrikan leaned forward, their massive forms casting long shadows across the chamber. The leader let out a low growl, its claws twitching as it studied the projection. "This is our home," Lavra explained, pointing to the image. "We came from there. We didn't mean to disturb your world." The leader paused, then raised one of its claws and tapped the hologram. The image shimmered and shifted, distorting slightly under the creature's touch. Lavra smiled nervously, unsure if this was a good sign or a bad one. Then, unexpectedly, the leader stepped back and gestured toward the walls of the fortress. The glowing patterns etched into the stone began to shift and change, forming new shapes and designs. Lavra gasped. It's art," she said, turning to Hayes. "These patterns, they're not just decorations. They're stories, like paintings or carvings. The Vrikan are showing us their history." The humans watched in awe as the glowing designs told a story of ancient battles, celestial events, and towering figures that seemed to represent the Vrikan themselves. Lavra realized that these creatures weren't just intelligent, they were deeply cultural beings, with traditions and beliefs that spanned millennia. It was a revelation that changed everything. Encouraged by this breakthrough, Lavra decided to share more of humanity's culture with the Vrikan. She brought out additional holograms, this time showing famous works of art from Earth, the Mona Lisa, Van Gogh's Starry Night, and even modern sculptures. The Vrikan reacted with visible interest, their glowing eyes widening as they studied the images. One of the smaller creatures stepped forward and traced its claw along the projection of Starry Night, creating ripples in the light. Lavra smiled, realizing that they understood the concept of creativity. "They're fascinated," she whispered to Hayes. "This is how we connect with them, through art." Hayes nodded, though his expression remained cautious. "Good work, Dr. Bennett, but don't let your guard down. We still don't know how far this will go." As the exchange continued, Lavra noticed something else about the Vrikan. Their armor wasn't just functional, it was covered in intricate designs that shimmered in the dim light. Each piece seemed unique, with patterns that glowed faintly, almost like embers. She pointed to one of the designs and mimicked the act of drawing with her finger. The leader tilted its head, then used its claw to scratch a pattern into the ground. It was simple but deliberate, resembling a spiral. Lavra knelt down and copied the design in the dirt with her finger, adding a small star in the center. The leader let out a low rumble, almost like laughter, and nodded approvingly. For the first time since arriving on Kepler 538b, the humans felt a genuine connection with the Vrikan. It was fragile, but it was real. Back on the Odyssey, the crew gathered to discuss the day's progress. Lavra was brimming with excitement as she described the Vrikan's artistic nature and their APPARENT appreciation for human creativity. "They're not just warriors," she said. "They're storytellers just like us. If we focus on that, we might be able to build trust." Hayes listened intently, his expression thoughtful. "That's promising, but we can't ignore the fact that they still see us as intruders. How do we convince them that we're not a threat? We show them our vulnerabilities," Lavra suggested. "They need to see that we're not perfect, that we struggle just like they do. Maybe then they'll understand that we're not here to take anything from them." Ryan Carter raised an eyebrow. "You mean like, show them our weaknesses? Isn't that kind of risky?" "It's a calculated risk," Lavra replied, "but I think it's worth it. Trust has to go both ways." Hayes considered this for a moment, then nodded. "All right. Let's prepare some visuals, images of Earth's challenges. Natural disasters, wars, poverty. Show them that we're not invincible." The next day, The humans returned to the fortress, armed with new holograms. This time the images showed scenes of devastation, hurricanes tearing through cities, wildfires consuming forests, and people struggling to rebuild after earthquakes. The Vrikan watched silently, their glowing eyes reflecting the flickering light of the projections. When the images ended, the leader let out a low growl, its claws flexing slightly. Lavra spoke softly, her voice filled with emotion. "This is our world. It's beautiful, but it's also fragile. We fight to survive, just like you. We're not here to harm you, we're here to learn." The leader paused, then stepped forward and touched the hologram of a burning forest. Its claw left a faint trail of light, almost like a healing gesture. Lavra felt a lump form in her throat as she realized the significance of the moment. The Vrikan understood. They saw humanity not as invaders, but as survivors. Despite the progress, tension still simmered among the crew. Samantha Lee and Greg Miller continued to plot their sabotage, unaware that Jake Monroe had reported them to Hayes. The commander confronted the pair privately, his tone icy. "I know what you're planning," he said. "And I'm ordering you to stand down. If you interfere with this mission, you'll answer to me." Samantha glared at him, her face flushed with anger. "You don't understand, Commander. These creatures are too dangerous. We can't afford to trust them." "That's not your call to make," Hayes replied firmly. "Now get back to your posts and don't let me catch you scheming again." As the crew prepared for the next phase of negotiations, Lavra couldn't shake the feeling that they were running out of time. The Vrikan were curious, yes, but they were still unpredictable. One wrong move could undo everything they had worked so hard to achieve. Still, she clung to hope. If art and vulnerability could bridge the gap between two vastly different species, then maybe, just maybe, peace was possible. The humans returned to the fortress for what they hoped would be a breakthrough in their negotiations with the Vrikan. Lavra Bennett carried a new set of holographic projections, this time focusing on humanity's achievements, images of towering skyscrapers, advanced technology, and peaceful gatherings. She believed that showing the Vrikan both humanity's struggles and its triumphs would help them see Earth as a complex, multifaceted civilization. Commander Daniel Hayes walked beside her, his expression calm but alert, while Private Jake Monroe stayed close, ready to act if needed. As they entered the chamber, the leader of the Vrikan greeted them with a low rumble. Its glowing eyes scanned the group, lingering on Lavra for a moment before it gestured for them to approach. Lavra activated the hologram, projecting an image of a bustling city skyline into the air. The Vrikan leaned forward, their massive forms casting long shadows across the room. The leader let out a soft growl, almost like curiosity, and reached out with one of its claws to touch the projection. The light shimmered under its claw, distorting slightly, and the creature tilted its head as if trying to understand. "This is our world," Lavra said softly, pointing to the hologram. "We've built cities, created machines, and learned to live together. But we've also made mistakes. We're still learning." The leader paused, then stepped back and gestured toward the walls of the fortress. Once again, the glowing patterns etched into the stone began to shift and change, forming new designs. This time, the images depicted strange structures that looked like floating cities, surrounded by swirling clouds of energy. Lavra gasped, realizing that the Vrikan were showing them their own achievements, technologies, and architecture far beyond anything humanity had ever seen. "They're sharing their history," she whispered to Hayes. "This is incredible." Hayes nodded, though his expression remained cautious. "Good work, Dr. Bennett, but don't lose focus. We're still walking a fine line here." As the exchange continued, the atmosphere in the chamber shifted. The Vrikan seemed more relaxed, their glowing eyes no longer fixed on the humans with suspicion. Lavra felt a glimmer of hope. For the first time, she believed that peace might actually be possible. But just as she was about to suggest another round of communication, chaos erupted. A loud explosion rocked the fortress, sending shockwaves through the chamber. Dust and debris rained down from the ceiling, and the humans instinctively dropped to the ground. The Vrikan roared in anger, their massive wings unfurling as they turned toward the source of the blast. Laura looked around frantically, trying to figure out what had happened. Then she saw a small device lying near the base of one of the walls, its casing cracked and smoking. What was that? Ryan Carter shouted, his voice barely audible over the commotion. Before anyone could answer, Samantha Lee and Greg Miller stepped forward, their faces pale but determined. "It was us," Samantha admitted, her voice trembling. "We planted the device. We didn't want to risk trusting these creatures." Lavra stared at them in disbelief. "Are you insane? You could have killed us all." "It was supposed to be a distraction," Greg stammered. "Just enough to make them doubt us. We thought it would buy us time to retreat." "You've doomed us," Jake Monroe snapped, his fists clenched in anger. "Do you realize what you've done?" The leader of the Vrikan let out a deafening roar, its glowing eyes blazing with fury. It raised its massive claws, ready to strike, and the other creatures followed suit. The humans scrambled to their feet, backing away as the Vrikan surrounded them. Lavra stepped forward, her hands raised in a gesture of peace. "Wait!" she shouted, her voice shaking. "This wasn't us. They acted alone." The leader paused, its claws hovering in the air. It tilted its head, studying Laura closely, then glanced at Samantha and Greg. For a moment, it seemed to consider her words. Then it let out another growl, softer this time, and gestured for the humans to leave the chamber. Hayes wasted no time. "Fall back," he ordered. "Move." The crew retreated quickly, their hearts pounding as they fled the fortress. Behind them, the Vrikan roared in anger, their voices echoing through the rocky landscape. When they reached the safety of the Odyssey, Hayes turned to confront Samantha and Greg. "You two are under arrest," he said coldly. "Confine them to quarters until further notice." Back on the ship, tensions ran high. The crew gathered in the briefing room to assess the damage. Lavra paced back and forth, her mind racing. "This is a disaster," she said, her voice tinged with frustration. "Everything we worked for, it's gone. The Vrikan will never trust us now." "Maybe not," Hayes replied. "But we can't give up, not yet." Ryan frowned. "What do we do? Go back and apologize? They'll tear us apart." "No," Lavra said firmly. "We show them the truth. We prove that not all humans are like Samantha and Greg. We expose their betrayal." Jake nodded. "I recorded everything there. Confession, the explosion. If we show that footage to the Vrikan, maybe they'll understand." Hayes considered this for a moment, then nodded. "It's risky, but it's our only chance. Prepare the footage, and we'll return tomorrow. But this time we go in unarmed. If we want to earn their trust, we need to show them we're willing to take a risk." The next morning, the crew returned to the fortress, their nerves stretched thin. Lavra carried a small screen displaying the recorded footage of Samantha and Greg's confession. As they entered the chamber, the leader of the Vrikan greeted them with a low growl, its glowing eyes filled with suspicion. Lavra stepped forward, holding up the screen. "This is the truth," she said, her voice steady despite her fear. "These two betrayed us. They acted without our knowledge or consent." The leader tilted its head, studying the screen closely. The footage played, showing Samantha and Greg planting the device and admitting their guilt. The Vrikan watched silently, their massive forms unmoving. When the video ended, the leader let out a low rumble, almost like contemplation. Then it gestured for Lavra to come closer. She hesitated for a moment, then approached cautiously. The leader reached out with one of its claws, tapping the screen lightly. A jolt of energy surged through it, and the footage replayed. this time with the Vrikan's telepathic pulses translating the words into their own language. Lavra held her breath, waiting for the creature's reaction. After what felt like an eternity, the leader stepped back and let out a soft growl. It gestured toward the humans, then toward the glowing patterns on the walls. Lavra exhaled slowly, realizing that the Vrikan understood. They knew the truth. Despite the breakthrough, the tension between the two species remained palpable. The leader of the Vrikan approached Hayes, its glowing eyes locked onto him. It let out a deep rumble, accompanied by a series of telepathic pulses that reverberated in their minds. Lavra struggled to interpret the message, her brow furrowed in concentration. It's a challenge, she said finally. The leader wants to test us to see if we're worthy of trust. A challenge? Hayes asked, his tone wary. What kind of challenge? Lavra hesitated, then pointed to Hayes and mimicked the act of combat. It wants you to fight, Hayes frowned, his jaw tightening. Against one of them? Yes, Lavra replied. It's a ritual way to prove your strength and honor. The crew exchanged uneasy glances. Fighting a 7-meter dragon-like creature seemed like a death sentence, but refusing would mean certain failure. Hayes took a deep breath, then nodded. All right, he said firmly. I'll do it. As the humans prepared for the duel, Lavra couldn't shake the feeling that they were gambling with their lives. The Vrikan were powerful and unpredictable, and Hayes was vastly outmatched. But she also knew that this was their only chance to salvage the mission. If they failed, humanity's future among the stars would be bleak. As the leader of the Vrikan led Hayes to the center of the chamber, Lavra whispered a silent prayer, hoping that courage and determination would be enough to bridge the gap between two worlds. The chamber fell silent as Commander Daniel Hayes stepped into the center of the arena-like space. The Vrikan had cleared a wide circle in the fortress, their glowing eyes fixed on the human leader. Lavra Bennett stood at the edge of the crowd, her heart pounding as she watched Hayes prepare for the duel. She knew this was more than just a fight. It was a test of honor, trust, and courage. If Hayes failed, it could mean the end of humanity's fragile connection with the Vrikan. The leader of the Vrikan, Jirak, approached Hayes with slow, deliberate steps. Its massive form towered over him, its shimmering scales reflecting the dim light of the chamber. In one claw, it held a ceremonial blade, a long curved weapon etched with intricate patterns that glowed faintly. Jirak extended the blade toward Hayes, offering it to him. Hayes hesitated for a moment, then reached out and took it. The weapon felt heavy in his hands, unfamiliar but balanced. Jirak let out a low growl, its glowing eyes narrowing as it studied Hayes. Then it gestured toward itself, tapping its chest with one claw before pointing at Hayes. Lavra interpreted the gesture immediately. It's giving you a choice, she whispered to Hayes. You can use the blade or you can fight barehanded. Hayes glanced at the blade, then back at Jirak. He set the weapon down carefully, showing that he would face the challenge unarmed. A ripple of surprise passed through the Vrikan, their glowing eyes widening slightly. Jirak tilted its head, almost as if it were impressed, then stepped back and raised its claws in preparation for the duel. The duel began with a deafening roar from Jirak. It lunged forward, its massive claws swiping through the air with terrifying speed. Hayes barely managed to dodge, rolling to the side as the ground where he had been standing cracked under the force of the blow. The humans watching gasped, their hearts racing as they realized just how dangerous this fight truly was. Hayes stayed on the defensive, using his agility to avoid Jirak's attacks. He darted left and right, trying to find an opening, but the creature's size and strength made it nearly impossible to get close. Every time Hayes attempted to strike, Jirak countered with a powerful swipe or a quick step backward. The duel quickly became a test of endurance, with Hayes struggling to keep up with the relentless assault. Lavra clenched her fists, her nails digging into her palms as she watched the fight unfold. "He can't keep this up forever," she muttered. To Ryan Carter, who stood beside her, "Jirac is too strong." Ryan nodded grimly. "But if he gives up, it's over for all of us." Hayes seemed to realize this too. Despite the exhaustion creeping into his muscles, he pushed himself harder, searching for any weakness in Jirac's defense. Finally, he spotted an opportunity. As Jirac raised one of its claws for another attack, Hayes ducked underneath it and delivered a swift kick to the creature's leg. The blow didn't injure Jirac, but it surprised the creature, causing it to stumble slightly. The Vrikan watching let out a collective rumble, almost like applause. Jirac regained its footing and turned to face Hayes, its glowing eyes narrowing. For a moment, it seemed to consider the human leader with newfound respect. Then it roared again, louder this time, and charged forward. Hayes braced himself, knowing he couldn't dodge this attack. At the last second, he dropped to the ground and rolled between Jirac's legs, coming up behind the creature. Before Jirac could turn around, Hayes grabbed one of its claws and held on tightly, using his weight to pull the creature off balance. Jirac stumbled, its massive form crashing to the ground with a thunderous impact. The humans let out a collective gasp, their eyes wide with disbelief. Hayes stood over Jirac, his chest heaving as he struggled to catch his breath. He had won, or so it seemed, but Jirac wasn't finished yet. With a powerful surge, it pushed itself back to its feet, its glowing eyes blazing with determination. It let out a deep growl, then raised one claw and brought it down toward Hayes. The humans shouted in alarm, certain that the duel was about to end in tragedy. But just as the claw was about to strike, Jirac stopped, holding it inches above Hayes' head. Larva stepped forward, her voice trembling as she addressed the creature. "Enough," she shouted. "He's proven himself. You see his courage, his strength. He fought fairly without weapons, even though he knew he was outmatched. Isn't that what you wanted?" Jirac paused, its glowing eyes shifting to Lavra. It let out a low rumble, almost like contemplation, then slowly lowered its claw. Hayes collapsed to his knees, exhausted but alive. The Vrikan gathered around him, their glowing eyes no longer filled with hostility, but with something resembling admiration. After the duel, the atmosphere in the chamber shifted dramatically. Jirac approached Hayes, extending one claw to help him stand. Hayes hesitated for a moment, then accepted the gesture, allowing the creature to lift him to his feet. The other Vrikan rumbled softly, their massive forms bowing slightly in a show of respect. Lara stepped forward, her voice filled with emotion. "You see now," she said, addressing Jirac. "We're not all the same. Some of us are willing to risk everything for peace." Jirac tilted its head, studying her closely. Then it gestured toward the glowing patterns on the walls, which began to shift and change once again. This time, the images depicted scenes of cooperation, humans and Vrikan working together, sharing knowledge and resources. Lavra smiled, realizing that the creatures understood. They were willing to give humanity another chance. Back on the Odyssey, the crew gathered to discuss the outcome of the duel. Hayes sat in the briefing room, his body aching but his spirit unbroken. "We did it," he said, his voice filled with quiet pride. "We earned their trust." Lavra nodded, her eyes shining with tears of relief. "Yes, we did, but we can't take this lightly. The Vrikan are still cautious, and we need to prove ourselves every day. One mistake could undo everything." Ryan frowned. "So what's next? Do we sign some kind of treaty?" "Not yet," Hayes replied, "but we'll work toward it. For now, we focus on building trust. Show them that we're here to cooperate, not to conquer." As the crew prepared for the next phase of their mission, Jake Monroe approached Hayes, his expression serious. "Commander, I've been thinking. What happens if Samantha and Greg try something like this again? We can't afford another betrayal." Hayes sighed, his jaw tightening. I'll deal with them when we return to Earth. For now they stay confined to quarters. But you're right, we can't let anything like this happen again. From now on, every decision we make has to be for the good of both species. The humans returned to the fortress one final time, this time to formalize their agreement with the Vrikan. Gerak led them to a large stone tablet in the center of the chamber, its surface glowing faintly. Lavra placed her hand on the tablet, mimicking a gesture she had seen the Vrikan use during their earlier exchanges. Gerak followed suit, pressing one of its claws against the stone. A surge of energy rippled through the chamber, sealing the bond between the two species. As the humans prepared to leave Kepler 538b, Lavra looked back at the fortress one last time. She felt a deep sense of gratitude, not just for the Vrykans' willingness to trust, but for the courage and determination of her team. The road ahead would be difficult, but for the first time, she truly believed that peace was possible. Hayes stood beside her, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "This is just the beginning," he said quietly, "but it's a start." And with that, the Odyssey lifted off, carrying its crew back toward Earth, and toward a future shaped by the fragile bond they had forged with the 7-meter dragon aliens. The Odyssey soared through the vast expanse of space, leaving Kepler 538b behind. The crew sat in silence as the ship's engines hummed softly, each person lost in their own thoughts. They had faced unimaginable challenges and survived, but the weight of what they had accomplished and what still lay ahead was heavy on their minds. Lavra Bennett stared out of the viewport, her eyes reflecting the distant stars. She couldn't shake the image of Gerak, the leader of the Vrikan, standing tall and proud as they sealed their fragile bond. It wasn't just a treaty. It was a promise to work together, to trust, and to learn from one another. "Commander." Daniel Hayes stood nearby, his arms crossed tightly over his chest. He had risked everything in that duel, not just for himself, but for humanity. Though his body ached from the fight, he felt a strange sense of peace. For the first time in his life, he believed that diplomacy could truly change the course of history. But he also knew that this was only the beginning. The real test would come when they returned to Earth and shared their story with the rest of humanity. Ryan Carter sat at the controls, his fingers tapping lightly against the console. "Do you think they'll believe us?" he asked, breaking the silence. "Back on Earth, I mean. Will they trust the Vrikan?" Hayes sighed, running a hand through his hair. "They'll have to," he replied. "We don't have a choice. If we turn our backs on this alliance now, we risk losing everything." Lavra nodded, turning away from the viewport. "It won't be easy," she admitted. "People are afraid of what they don't understand. But if we can show them how much we've learned from the Vrikan, if we can prove that cooperation is possible, they'll listen." Jake Monroe leaned back in his seat, his expression thoughtful. "What about Samantha and Greg? What happens to them?" "They'll face consequences," Hayes said firmly. "Their actions nearly destroyed everything. But we'll deal with that later. Right now, our focus has to be on making sure humanity honors this agreement." As the Odyssey approached Earth, the crew prepared for their arrival. News of their mission had already spread, and the planet was buzzing with anticipation. People gathered in cities and towns, watching live broadcasts of the ship's descent. Some were hopeful, eager to hear about the mysterious alien species humanity had encountered. Others were skeptical, fearing that the Vrikan might pose a threat. The pressure on the crew was immense, but they were determined to share their story honestly and openly. When the Odyssey landed, the crew stepped onto the tarmac, greeted by a sea of reporters and cameras. Lavra held up her tablet, displaying holographic images of the Vrikan, their glowing eyes, intricate armor, and towering forms. "These are the Vrikan," she began, her voice steady despite the chaos around her. "They're intelligent, proud, and deeply cultural beings. We didn't always understand each other, but we found common ground. Through art, vulnerability, and courage, we built a bridge between our species. The crowd listened intently, their skepticism slowly giving way to curiosity. Lovra went on to explain the challenges they had faced, the misunderstandings, the betrayal, and the duel, and how they had overcome them. "This isn't just about survival," she said. "It's about growth. About learning from one another and becoming better because of it." Hayes stepped forward next, his presence commanding. "Attention. The Vrykins see us as equals," he said. "But that respect comes with responsibility. We must honor the trust they've placed in us. If we fail, we risk not only our future, but theirs as well." In the days that followed, the crew worked tirelessly to share their experiences with world leaders, scientists, and the public. They showed footage of the fortress, the glowing patterns on its walls, and the ceremonial duel. They explained the Vrykins' language, their telepathic communication, and their deep connection to their ancestors. Slowly but surely, people began to see the aliens not as monsters but as partners. Samantha Lee and Greg Miller were brought before a tribunal to answer for their actions. Their sabotage had nearly cost humanity its chance at peace, and they faced severe consequences. But even they seemed to realize the gravity of what they had done. "We thought we were protecting Earth," Samantha said during the hearing, her voice trembling. "But now I see, we were wrong. The Vrykin aren't our enemies, they're our teachers." Greg nodded, his head bowed in shame. "We acted out of fear," he admitted. "But fear doesn't solve anything. It only divides us." The tribunal sentenced them to community service, requiring them to help educate others about the importance of trust and cooperation. It wasn't just punishment, it was redemption. Months passed, and the relationship between humans and the Vrykin grew stronger. Scientists from both species exchanged knowledge, sharing advancements in technology, medicine, and art. Artists collaborated, blending human creativity with the Vrykins' intricate designs to create works that inspired millions, even ordinary. Citizens began to embrace the idea of unity, celebrating festivals that honored both cultures. Lavra became a spokesperson for the Alliance, traveling the world to share her experiences. She often spoke about the moment Jurak had touched her forehead, scanning her thoughts. "It wasn't just a gesture of curiosity," she explained. "It was an act of trust. They let us into their world, and in return, we opened ours too." Them. Hayes remained a quiet but steadfast leader, ensuring that humanity upheld its end of the agreement. He worked closely with military leaders to reduce tensions and prevent any further misunderstandings. "War is easy," he once said during a speech. "Peace is hard, but it's worth fighting for." 1 year after the mission, the Vrykin sent a delegation to Earth. Jirek himself led the group, his massive form drawing gasps of awe from the crowds that gathered to greet him. He carried a gift, a small glowing crystal etched with patterns that shifted and changed like the ones in the fortress. When presented to Lovra, the crystal emitted a soft hum, resonating with her heartbeat. "It's beautiful," she whispered, holding it gently in her hands. "What does it mean?" Jirek tilted his head, then gestured toward the sky. "Unity," Lovra interpreted, her voice filled with emotion. "A symbol of our bond." The delegation spent weeks on Earth, meeting with leaders, scientists, and citizens. They marveled at humanity's achievements while sharing their own wisdom. Together, humans and Vrykin began planning joint missions to explore the stars, combining their strengths to venture farther than either species could alone. As the Vrykin prepared to leave Earth, Lavra stood beside Jurak, watching as the delegation boarded their ship. "Thank you," she said softly, looking up at the towering creature, "for trusting us." Jurak let out a low growl, almost like a purr, and tapped her forehead lightly with one claw. This time, the jolt of energy felt warm and comforting, like a reassurance. "Trust," Lavra heard in her mind, the word clear and unmistakable. Tears welled up in her eyes as she watched the ship ascend into the sky. She knew that the road ahead would still be challenging, but she also knew that humanity wasn't alone anymore. Together, they had forged a bond that transcended fear and misunderstanding, a bond built on courage, sacrifice, and hope. As the ship disappeared into the stars, Lavra turned to Hayes, a smile spreading across her face. "We did it," she said. "We really did it." Hayes nodded, his expression calm but proud. "Yes, we did. And this is just the beginning." And with that, the crew of the Odyssey walked away, knowing that they had changed the course of history, not just for humanity, but for the entire galaxy.